Oh, what do you think? I think it's about time we get this party started. What do you think? What do you think? Let's do it. Welcome to What Are the Odds? What's up, dude? How you doing?
Good. It was up, went and visited the Republican convention in Milwaukee, which was fun. Great to see. I think they had other plans, some of the folks that were there, but the weekend before didn't go as some of them wanted, I think.
Yeah.
Some of the corporate suites emptied out quick. Mitch McConnell was I think there for other reasons. Same with Rupert Murdoch, but those plans went different directions. So great to see. It was good to see Don Jr. there, Dan Bongino, Tucker Carlson. Tucker's a natural. I mean, if he ever ran for office, he would be a natural. The natural in person, natural on the stage. But great news on JD Vance. And I guess because things didn't go according to some people's plans, they threw Uncle Joe from the train, but I think that's going to be a disaster. Some people are saying 1968. I'm thinking starting to look more like 1972.
That's what I was thinking, Robert. This looks like 72 to me. Everyone's making these comparisons. This is like a or maybe like feeling like a Gerald Ford situation even later, which came, of course, but feeling like a Gerald Ford situation where the vice president cannot get out from underneath the weight of the administration and the failures of the administration. I'm looking at the polling right now. It's going to be done sooner than I thought. I probably can, by the end of like the episode, at least before we get done, I can show you and some people what I'm saying. This is a response bias. So I was going to choke everybody up and say, it looks like the race is tightening. And then I said, it looks like the race is tightening. It doesn't mean the race is actually tightening. It looks like the race is tightening, except when I look at the demographics, I see that black voters are about 15% more likely to want to be interviewed this month. And by the way, black women, liberal black women. I see that white women that are liberal in the suburbs are dying to talk now. The raw sample, as of now, it will iron out, is about 58% female, and it's tied. Okay, so, it's 17.5% postgraduate. It's there's like a bunch of stuff that immediately jumps out as a red flag to me. It's 31% conservative. So what I'm saying, like, this is what is happening. Folks don't understand what I'm saying. A response bias, a lot of pollsters fall victim to it. It's when, like, Mitt Romney, he beats up on Barack Obama in the first debate. Then the polls show that Mitt Romney's ahead by 4 points. Mitt Romney was not ahead by 4 points. More Republicans talk to the pollsters. And yes, there are the principles of randomization that it sounds like I'm violating here. But guess what? We violated the principles of randomization the minute we opened up modes to different collection modes. So, like, if you're not just calling everybody on a landline, if you're not just calling everybody on a cell phone, if you already rape the principles of randomization. So that is the problem with the modern day polling industry, and people like me and others have been dealing with this for years, while other new pollsters have just, and by the way, even old pollsters who are just doing it now, Robert, like Fox News. Didn't they used to make fun of me for multi-mode collection, right? Do you remember? That's not legitimate. Right now, everybody tries to fake being the people's pundit, and they don't know what they're doing. That's the truth. This is the first year they're all trying to do this. They really don't know what they're doing. They don't see what I see immediately after years and years of doing this, which is like immediately there are red flags. You know it, man. We've been going over this for years. So it's not that Harris is really tied with Trump. It's that this is a response bias, and you have to learn how to get to representation past the response bias. You have to get past it. And they're not doing that, man. They're getting 1,000 responses saying I'm good, and that's it. We're going for 3K. 3K to make sure that everyone's represented, like because of this month. It's just that bad. So I want to just real quick before I toss it to you on that, or you can actually, if you want to speak on that, go ahead, because you know what I'm talking about. I do want to come back to what you were saying, but things did not go the way they wanted. I think I just want to say this before I kick it to you. I think everyone better come to the realization that the window that was left open to to create the conditions that made it possible for the near killing, which should have been the killing of Donald Trump, was intentional. I think people need to it's better that we all come to grips with this now, sooner rather than later, because there's no way in hell anyone who's ever done what I've done, anyone who's ever done, Sean Parnell was there. My buddy Sean Parnell, he was there. Secret Service people, Dan Bongino, you name it. Anyone who knows anything about this line of work or securing a perimeter, an area, there's no way in God's green earth this was incompetence or an accident. They're not this bad at their jobs, folks. Do not let them run this by you. This is getting worse and worse every day. But let me kick it to you, because I think that the timing, highly suspect, brother.
Oh yeah, no doubt. I think that for those that haven't followed us over the years, typically a great opportunity to bet in the political betting markets is in response to response bias events. So, for example, this is like people think that conventions. Well, there was this conventional opinion back in the day that conventions really moved people, debates really moved people, so on and so forth. And then, about a decade or so ago, some people really started to dig into the data. Pew did, some other people did. And what they found was what those polls were tracking was who was answering the poll, not a change of opinion of the actual voters. And that leads and that's what is colloquially called within the industry response bias. In other words, that you're getting a bias because a certain kind of person is more eager to answer the poll. First thing I was ever told when I was a kid working in a political campaign, and a local political science professor who did polling on the side for local campaigns, I asked him, how do polls work? And he goes, well, a poll tells you who answered the poll. And he goes, once you filter out the art and science of getting an accurate intel from that information, that's when you become a good pollster. But until then, you're tracking noise. Is what you're getting. And you're going to get a lot of noise around conventions. You're going to get a lot of noise around major events, changing candidates, debates, major news stories. For example, I made a lot of money getting to bet right after the Access Hollywood tape dropped. And what happened, if you dug into the data, there was massive response bias. Some Republicans were depressed about the news story that was damaging to Trump. Democrats were all excited. It changed who was answering the polls. Even amongst independents, it was Democratic-leaning independents who were answering the polls, not Republican or Trump-leaning independents. And so Trump all of a sudden is down 8 points, 10 points. He never was down 8, 10 points. Nope. That was a response. That was response bias. So being able to filter out response bias is critical to getting through the noise and seeing the underlying data. And what you're going to see with the underlying data is we'll talk about JD Vance is a fantastic choice for Trump. And despite all of the whiners and complainers in Washington, the fact they're complaining is a good sign, not a bad sign for Trump. But definitely, especially for his campaign, given who's going to decide the election. And Kamala Harris, in my view, has the lowest chances of winning since George McGovern in 1972. I mean, it's that bad. And you're going to see a lot of fake data. You're going to see a lot of fake stories. You're going to see a lot of fake media that's going to try to convince you otherwise. And I hope that they believe it. I hope the Democrats buy it, because that reduces the risk of another Butler, Pennsylvania between now and election day. So what stunned me was this.
Yeah.
What I didn't realize is Democrats got together and decided their problem wasn't that the economy sucks for working class people. Their problem wasn't wokeism on steroids everywhere. They can't avoid it even if they try. The problem isn't a completely out of control border and illegal immigration that's gone mad. The problem isn't having multiple wars abroad. No, the problem was their candidate was too white, too old, too
Yep.
male, too
Yep.
Midwestern, too ordinary, when
Yep.
that was the only thing keeping him afloat. That was the only thing that gave the Democratic Party any chance
Yep.
in this 2024 was that they had old Uncle Joe that a bunch of blue-collar voters in the Midwest still related to. They don't relate to Kamala Harris. I mean, we literally have the closest thing to the presidential candidate since the president from Idiocracy. And this is not going to fly. She is going to get crushed because where she is the least popular is in places that matter the most amongst working class Hispanics, working class African-American men, where she's never been strong, and working class older white voters who liked Joe Biden and don't care for her.
Let me play something because I want to say the thing that was propelling Trump and making him so strong this year, we've talked about, and I remember somebody clipped a video of us from last year, spring of last year, pinpointing these groups, younger people, African-American men, Hispanic men, right? And they were like, God, Barnes and Baris were talking about this like forever ago. And I'm thinking to myself, putting aside response biases and what people may be seeing in polls, just ask yourself, who is going to do better with those groups and where they matter? So who's going to do better, Joe Biden, Scranton Joe, or Kamala Harris in Macomb County, Michigan? Who's going to do better? Or in Saginaw for that, but even if it's whiter there, but you know what I mean? Like, who's going to do better in, there's only 2 battleground counties in Pennsylvania now, but Trump took those away, and Biden was doing better in areas like Luzerne, where Trump still won, but he was getting some back.
He did great relative in Scranton. I mean, they got 8 streets named after him. I mean, he really convinced the locals there that he was Scranton Joe. The only reason why he was doing better in Pennsylvania, the other Midwest states, is because of that northeastern part of the state. There's no way. Kamala Harris combines the IQ of Joe Biden with the likability of Hillary Clinton.
That's right. Exactly. This is where I keep getting in trouble for saying this, but I don't know why people get offended by it. It's just an accurate analogy. She's the black version of Hillary Clinton. That's what she is. And as soon as she goes out there, these response biases are going to fall away because Democrats are going to go, oh man, what do we do? That's what's going to happen here. Now, I also wonder about younger black men, middle-aged to younger black men who are no longer that connected or that loyal to the Democratic Party. And MSNBC ran this. I'm going to play this clip. It's real quick. MSNBC had this segment on where you probably know what I'm talking about, where they interviewed these 4 or 5, I'm going to look it up, black men. And let's just listen to what they say.
You know a black man who has expressed to you that they're committed to voting for Donald Trump. Okay. For the brothers who have told you that or said that to you, has the emergence of Kamala Harris changed that for those brothers? No. Why?
All right, so I just want to show people this. I know that's a joke.
Well, no, of course. I mean,
no.
Yeah, there's nothing about her she was never liked. I mean, this is someone who has never won a competitive race, a meaningful competitive race. I mean, even in California, that the only close to a competitive race she had was for attorney general, and she barely won that in an overwhelmingly Democratic state. She has not had to run outside of California ever because she dropped out because she was doing so badly. I mean,
which she would have lost anyway, Robert. Her first election the first election she ran that won, she would have lost anyway. He would have beat her, except she started banging Willie Brown, and that got her his machine. Come on, let's get real for a second. It's part of the story.
And Willie Brown clearly outmaneuvered Barack Obama because Obama.
Oh my God, didn't he? Oh my God.
Obama knows that Harris can't win.
Yes,
he hates the idea of Trump replacing him. It still lingers in his brain, clearly. And he thought, I can push Biden out and then replace Harris. I think he was going to recruit a celebrity. That's where he was going to go.
Yeah, people were saying his wife. I maintain that his wife is too lazy to ever do anything
and she
like
hates
that.
people, utterly hates human
people.
beings.
Yep.
Plus, I think Barack knows she's not that popular. I
Yeah.
think he was going to go,
Put her in front of
The
people.
Rock, George Clooney. He
Me
was
too.
going to find somebody from Hollywood,
Rock.
somebody that could compete with the charisma of and Kamala. There's no way Kamala outmaneuvered him because I mean she's good inside, but she's not that good. That has all the fingerprints of Willie Brown, whether it's by protege or by direct involvement. That she outmaneuvered him, Obama, that fast.
Yeah, I think. I think it was going to be The Rock. By the way, I think it was going to because he has already
he's told everybody under the sun he wants to be president.
He was approached like if there was some kind of cataclysmic event and we needed you, would you do it? Even though he hated Hillary Clinton, by the way. But let me just bring up people who follow our polling. They know two things. One, we have never overestimated Republicans like other polls have with Black voters and Hispanic voters. We don't do that like other polls do. And two, that Donald Trump was very clearly doing much better with African Americans and Hispanic voters this time around. The poll we just ran for you, and then the one we did after for the Four Freedoms poll, and then the one we did after had Donald Trump at 23% before leaning among Black voters. Here is right now. We're in the field right now. Here's the combined responses. I think we're at like 1,600 interviews so far. Here is the combined from all modes with Black voters right now, Trump versus Kamala. For people who can't see, I know it's kind of small. I know it's over 300 interviews with Black voters. So far, I look by area, suburbs, rural, urban. It's actually a little bit urban. Robert leans a little bit urban, and she leads Trump only 70.1 to 21.3. That is not a small sample for Black voters, by the way, for people who don't realize that. Let me get rid of the report style so people can see it. If I put a generic theme, I think it'll make it bigger for people to see. I know it's small right now. There we go.
I think Obama knew this, but it's like the other Democratic, there's some, Roy Texera and others have said, look, Kamala doesn't solve any of the problems.
Yeah.
But it sounds like the DC crowd has convinced themselves that they really think that the reason they were losing young Black men was because they didn't have a Black candidate.
Yeah.
And I mean, they don't seem to understand. Also, if you've studied this over time, there's always a big boost for the first Black candidate in whatever office, mayor, sheriff, senator, congressman, whatever, president, etc. That doesn't continue. You can't just roll out another Black candidate and keep getting this huge enthusiasm. It dies off. Plus, they all know, I mean, Obama was always quasi-Black, but at least he could pretend to be American in that sense. But Kamala Harris is everybody knows she's not Black. I mean, not in the American cultural sense. We have another person who's, Barack Obama, no slaves in his ancestry.
It just changed. I'm sorry. Go ahead. You finish. I just want it just changed because interviews are being conducted right now. So Trump is now at 23. So.
Yeah, exactly. And that's where it's going to be. If you understood where these voters are and why they're voting the way they are,
ridiculous.
You see it also reflected in the surge that we started talking about in Trump's approval. Yeah. That it was going to be Trump's 4 years looks a lot better in retrospect because he brought you peace and prosperity.
Yeah.
And Biden has brought you wars and poverty.
Yeah.
And a lot of it's tied to border policy. A lot of it's tied to other economic policy and foreign policy. And so the people look back and say, I know what I'm going to get with Trump. You can tell me he's going to be a disaster. You can put out all these Project 2025, whatever. The ordinary voter knows with Trump what they got. They know what they're going to get because they already got it. And what they got was peace abroad and prosperity at home. And under Biden, they know what they got. And under Harris, it's just Biden, but worse. It's Biden without the old man likability amongst older blue collar boomers in the Midwest. It's without the sort of sense of, well, he's at least kind of a moderate guy, even though that was never really true. There was a popular perception it was true. No one's ever thought of Kamala Harris as a moderate. She's got all negatives. They've convinced themselves because they live in these tiny little bubbles that if they had the ultimate diversity candidate, and that's why Elon Musk was sharing that parody video, that would solve their problems. It actually intensifies and amplifies their problems.
Here is and again, I mean, it's looking like it's getting more representative, as I told people it would. Like, it's just the way it works. The larger the sample, the more representative it gets, as long as you don't have a design effect that's really, really bad, which is what, by the way, Nate Cohen was trying to say of the Maris poll that shows Trump ahead of her. He was like, well, that's because it's got online, and you got to you got to account for the design effect. And I'm like, the only thing you have to account for, Nate, is whether or not they've been accurate or not, because every mode has a design effect. Every mode has a problem with how you, and by the way, if you read the methodology for like Harvard Harris, by the way, they know this. They outline it in great detail, and they explain that that's why they wait for certain variables that others don't wait for, because it accounts for, for instance, certain groups being online, having a propensity to be online at longer than others, or at certain times when others are not. So they are accounting for that. People who have been online polling or doing mixed mode, you know that already. It's not novel. It's like Nate Cohen just figured that out. He's just learning about this stuff because he doesn't know. They just started to wade into that arena as well. They've always been live caller. Here is what you were talking about before, Trump's retrospective approval. We've always been kind of bullish on Biden's approval. He's only fallen, I think 37 is his all-time low for us. We usually have him around 42, something like that. He's around 40 right now. And this is Donald Trump. Again, do you approve or disapprove of the way Donald Trump handled his job as president? 32% strongly approve of how Donald Trump handled his job. 19% somewhat approved, giving Donald Trump what, folks? A majority approval, it looks just like the Wall Street Journal poll. Just like the Wall Street Journal poll.
First time it's been, but you knew it was trending that way.
It was.
We've been talking about for the last several years.
Yep.
It's not like some people say, "Oh, Barnes."
Historically.
Yeah, I mean, like some people were like, "Oh, Barnes, do you think that Taylor Swift, Beyonce fans are going to be deciding policy?" That's not what I'm talking about.
Right.
What I'm talking about is your ordinary person just looks at the fundamentals. They don't look at details of policy or the rest. When I say they're choosing policy, it's the consequences of those policies. In other words, with Trump, they had relative prosperity.
Yep.
With Trump, they had global peace. With Biden, they got war after war abroad, and they got economic problems at home. The core one they're focused on right now is inflation, because it's the one that stares them in the face every day. But you could look at it more broadly. They can't afford housing. They can't afford rent. They can't afford to buy a home. They can't afford transportation. They're often living at home with their parents. I mean, for the younger generation, it's just bad for younger working class voters. And the Democratic Party mythology was built that the idea that millennials and Zoomers would be permanently part of their alignment. And they've been abandoning them for the last 4 years. And Kamala Harris, by playing identity politics, that wasn't the problem. They weren't saying, well, I would be voting Democrat, but I want someone who checks all the right boxes. That isn't what they were thinking. And yet these people in these upper middle class college Ivy League bubbles who think the economy is great, who don't understand why everybody's unhappy with the economy.
I know. Well, what's wrong with them? What's wrong with them?
And it's about to get worse. You look at the underlying economic numbers, we're about to probably head into a recognized recession in terms of where housing is trending, where construction is trending, where other key dynamics are trending for younger working class people. So there's nothing about Kamala Harris that can appeal to them. How does she convince them? Is she going to restore prosperity? Why would they believe that? She's from California. I mean, this is where Peter Thiel was good. He said, watch, the Democrats will nominate somebody in 2024 from California because they think California is their stellar example. And then they're going to discover the whole country doesn't want to be like California. They don't want a crime problem. They don't want an immigration problem. They don't want a homelessness problem. They don't want government jobs to be the only good jobs, which is the reality in California, unless you're in big tech or Hollywood. So I think and it goes to your points about mode, as we've talked about before. What happened was polling went from being local, like in the old days, in the late 1880s, 1890s, your local journalist would go to knew his local neighborhood, knew who was reflective and representative of a broader voting community and constituency, because the art and science of polling is how do you talk to a few thousand people, and from that deduce the likely opinions of millions of people. And the art form was originally based in that. Then it shifted to people using postcards and new mechanisms. The postcards ended up having a response bias problem, a mode bias problem. And so then Gallup started going door to door. and went door to door from about 1932 or so to 1970. Well, fully to 1972 in part, at least, and then shifted to landlines, calling landlines. And half of the people, when they were going door to door, when they were using postcards, when it was journalists talking to the people he knew, from any mode from 1896 to 2004, you had a response rate of almost 50% on mode. And then that radically declined. People didn't have to answer phones. They got the opportunity to not have to answer phones. All of a sudden you have people on cell phones, no longer on landlines. You're no longer able to control whether you're talking to someone who has 2 or 3 different phones. You don't know if they're even in the same jurisdiction as the phone number that they're assigned to. And all of a sudden response rate went from 50% to 2%, where 98% of the people you try to reach don't answer. All of a sudden, phone calls, phone methods of polling, live phone polling became ridiculously expensive. And the people convinced themselves that was a gold standard when it wasn't, because that 2% that's answering the phone is not representative of the 98% that ain't. And so then it becomes, how do you reach them? You reach them through online, you reach them through emails, you reach them through texting. You try to combine all these different modes so you can get something representative that's more reflective of the broader audience that they represent. And you have to be really good at the art and science of it, or you'll get bad results on a continuous and consistent basis. And that's why most polls, other than Richard's polls, for the last decade have been more wrong than right, with a skew in the Democratic side. And I'm still not convinced these polls that the mainstream media is doing is not skewed to the Democratic side. I'm not convinced they've tried to improve on their problem of undersampling working class representative voters.
They have, yeah.
But you look at what Nate Cohn just put out, right? His underlying numbers show a disaster for Harris. I mean, she's getting in the low 20s amongst working class whites in the Midwest. That's death. That's done. She's finished on a nationwide basis.
He's doing better.
He's pretending that his democratically skewed electorate means he's more competitive.
She's doing that number, which is what I'm telling you. We're going to be a mix. I think I'm just, because I've been doing this a while. It's not done yet. But from what I see, I think we're going to be somewhere in the neighborhood of between the Wall Street Journal poll and the New York Times poll, with a caveat explaining this stuff to people. And what it looks like to me is that she does better, which is not surprising, Robert, in her own home state, which was getting tight for some reason against Biden. Well, we know what reason, but she does better in her own home state. And, in some of the blue areas that Biden was really suffering.
Upper middle class government areas, Northern Virginia.
Perfect.
Places like that. But that's going to be all. I mean, the areas that, the Twin City burbs, right?
Yeah.
Places like that. But she's not going to play better where Biden was playing okay, in Macomb County, Michigan, and Erie County, Pennsylvania, and Scranton, Pennsylvania, in places like
County, Wisconsin,
rural working class Wisconsin.
Yep.
Harris is not going to play well in Wisconsin at all. She is very, even the lefties that get put out in Wisconsin have like a rural tilt or an everyday common person tilt. Even the lesbian senator from Madison, she always had a ordinary person. You wouldn't think of it looking from afar, but I knew her in Madison. She came across as very ordinary, very everyday, very accessible. That's your progressive Wisconsin. Feingold. Think people like that. That's who has won, that's been from the left in Wisconsin. It's not people like Kamala Harris. These California people are not going to play well in a state that's more rural and small town than it is urban, unlike Minnesota. So I think, Michigan, maybe she does a little better in Oakland, but she's going to do worse in Macomb. She's going to do worse in Monroe.
Where? Right. Because where is she going to do? She's going to do better in the more upscale suburbs of Oakland. But what does that mean for Southern Macomb, where he was doing better with these working class minorities? Is she really going to peel them back? And so far, looking at our poll, that's not the case. The Hispanics we spoke to, 32% said they voted for Donald Trump in 2020, which is low. All right. Now 38% initially choose him. So he's already gone up among that group. And then when you lean, it's going to get him to the low 40s. So already, again, that would be huge for him. And in Michigan, he actually didn't do that badly among Hispanics in Michigan. It's about 5 to 7% of the electorate. And it was Pennsylvania where he got whopped among Hispanics. But it's a smaller group, so who knows? Maybe just a sampling. But by the way, with what you were saying before, the response rates drops. to deal with the decrease in response rates. You have got to increase your sample. You have got to increase your sample and make sure you're paying. Each mode is going to have higher participation among some groups, and you got to know all that. But the increase in the sample is such a big deal. I've been bitching and moaning about for years. Some are getting with it, Robert, but some are just still are not. And you brought up issues before, like what these people care about. Let me just pull this up real quick. Here we go. Yeah, it's way too, by the way, this is still kind of like, I think it'll end good, but it's still educated, very, very educated. So he should be, and by the way, she'll pull those post-grad margins back closer to where Biden was in 2020. But here is
but she's going to run worse amongst high school educated and some college people.
She's at like 25% right now, dude. She's at like 25%,
which is a disaster. And so what people are going to see in the polling day, and it's going to be amplified by the convention and everything there, and they push, they're going to do a hagiograph. I mean, I don't know if you saw that front page of New York, the New York Magazine. It's it's like Camelot. It's just Camelot. I mean, come on.
They've done this before, though, Robert. They did this before in 2020 because they really wanted her. In 2020, they did not want Joe Biden. He was like the, I don't want to say golden parachute, but he was definitely the contingency plan. He bombed and farted out in the early primary states. They didn't want him, but he was the only one still there. Kamala didn't make it until Iowa. Not a single vote has ever been cast for her for president, which is a hive mind thing in and of itself. If we have time,
I mean, that's never happened in the modern era. Like even Hubert Humphrey had got votes before. I mean, and nobody has been nominated in the primary era getting zero votes ever in the primaries. I mean, it's and they think this is just going to go just fine with everybody. Everybody's gonna be like, oh, okay, that's how we pick our candidates. We make Venezuela look like the gold standard of election integrity.
I'm so sick of hearing people bitch and moan about Venezuela. You cannot lecture Venezuela on election integrity or credible, legitimate elections. You cannot lecture Russia about political prisoners. When you turned a blind eye to both in your own damn country, you gave up your moral authority to lecture anybody. And I would argue, and Mark Mitchell from Rasmussen, pollster from Rasmussen, he responded on Twitter to me when I said that, and he was like, actually, I think it's worse. Because I had brought up it's more sophisticated here, right? But it's worse because it's centralized in Venezuela. Whereas it's not centralized here, which makes it much, much more difficult to be able to deal with, But just so I don't want to run away before we show you the numbers that you were talking about before. What do these people care about? Inflation and cost of living is still, I mean, it's almost like they haven't budged at all. Immigration's actually up a few points in this poll from last month, but economy and jobs is second. Immigration is third. Inflation, cost of living is the first. And by the way, notice how we word issues. Whether you're on the right or the left, you have different words for each issue. So if you just say abortion, then likely you're just appealing to the left-wing voters. All right. So instead we say abortion rights and restrictions, immigration and border security, threats to democracy and corruption, climate change and the environment, crime and safety, right? So there's inflation and cost of living, right? So we do that because we're trying to appeal to both sides. If you just say gun control, you're appealing to the left. If you say gun control and gun rights, you're appealing to both, and you're going to get both sides telling you what's more important to them. But yeah, man, I mean, the issues, and it brings me up like what you just said and what Molly Hemingway said yesterday on Fox. The fundamentals have not changed here. And we also asked, who do you trust more? The only thing she's doing a little bit better with against Joe Biden is preserving Social Security and Medicare. Trump and Biden were essentially even on that. It looks like she's going to have a little bit of a lead, but he's stumping her on the economy. He's stumping her on immigration. He's stumping her on inflation. He's beating her on crime. He's trouncing her on national security and foreign policy. Maybe labor, she'll do a little bit better with union issues. But the Russo,
more like your government union issues. I mean, her extreme environmental positions and anti-fracking positions are going to be a disaster with those unions.
Trying to cover up, by the way, which they're
Yeah.
trying
Oh, yeah. I mean, they'll do great. But this is the thing. Given it the hagiographic media push for her and redefinition of her. I mean, 2 weeks ago, New York Times saying she'd be the worst candidate, but now all of a sudden she's she should be up. And especially, I was going to ask you about this. I think we're going to start seeing the old Democratic polling bias come back.
Yeah, me too.
Because a lot of that bias is based on them undersampling representative working class voter groups and oversampling upper middle class, professional class voter groups.
Yeah.
And the voter groups that like Harris the best is that professional managerial class group, and that like her the least is that working class group. And if we get a return to some of the polling bias of 2020, then that will. And people forget. I mean, those numbers were off by on multiple elections now when it came to Trump by 6 to 8 points in Wisconsin, 6 to 8 points in Michigan, 4 to 6 points or 8 points, depending on which election it was, which poll it was, Pennsylvania. They've been horrendous at capturing the working class voter. They always oversample the upper middle class voter, given she skews in that direction. Even worse, I think, than Hillary, because Hillary, at least in 2008, because she had to run to the working class to try to compete with Obama, which had skepticism about Obama, she actually got some bona fides with some working class Democrats in the Midwest that she was able to carry over to 2016. I mean, it was wasn't enough to win, but I would say it's better than what Kamala's got. I think Kamala, like in rural working class areas, I mean, that she's totally foreign. Biden, they recognize. And the older Democratic voter doesn't mind that much. Okay, he's a little corrupt. Now and then you want a little corrupt when you want Junior to get a job or to get
it done. Get it done. Yeah,
exactly. That old school blue, New York, New Jersey. Think that mindset just across the industrial Midwest. The Harris comes across as a foreigner. I mean, like as foreign as Obama, but not as likable as Obama. I mean, Obama at least had a certain sort of charisma and natural panache that the media helped create, but he was still legitimately could say, okay, that guy's got legitimate charisma in the room. Kamala legitimately does not. I mean, there's nothing. I mean, she was an utter disaster as presidential candidate. And I think some of the. Do you think the polling? How much do you think they've really fixed the 2020, 2016 polling errors? And might we see a resurgence of them because of how Kamala skews?
This is what I was worried about a month ago, 2 months ago, which is that Donald Trump was not doing better completely because of just the working class non-whites and others that were going to him. It was also that he was starting to get around 42% of post-grad degrees. He was like starting to get real, almost close to parity with 4-year college grads. So and they love to take polls. So if they're still understating his support among like groups I just pinpointed right here, then this shift is going to look more pronounced for Kamala than it actually is. So polling thought Hillary Clinton was going to get about 38%. I went back and looked. One of them was actually 42%. The ABC News Washington Post poll was 42% of the white working class vote. She got 30%. Okay, so this is what Biden, that's what helped Biden in 2020. Now we all know about the shenanigans, but Biden won back some of those Scranton voters. He won back some voters in Luzerne. He most definitely won back some voters in Macomb. Would it have been enough without the shenanigans? I don't know. Probably not. Honestly, from just like the totality of everything I've seen. But still, he did better. This is Kamala, because I just looked among white working class overall. She's at 27%. That's what she's at. Among white working class in rural areas, she's at 22%. So where are more of these white working class voters? Yeah, they're in the urban centers. Sure. There's some in suburbs. There are different kinds of suburbs in America. There are many in the suburb, the small city, small town. That's where they are. So this is
like
what
Wisconsin, where 2/3 of the vote comes from counties that don't produce a bunch of big votes. There's only so much Milwaukee, the burbs, and the places like as James Carville once described Pennsylvania. You got Philly, you got Pittsburgh, and in between you got the state of Alabama.
Yeah, he's getting
you
crazier
got
and crazier.
you
But I
got the
love
Upper
it.
Peninsula and certain parts of Michigan, along with the industrial old auto base. I just think she's in they're convincing themselves that they can win. Like the Arab vote is just a small vote in Minneapolis, the Muslim vote, and Detroit. I don't think they can get him back. I mean that vote, that's a protest vote. That was a big protest.
Yeah.
I don't think they're coming back for Kamala. And I think all they're going to do is lose a little bit. They're not going to lose a lot, but they're going to still lose some of the Jewish vote if she tries to play the I'm on both sides of the Israel. That you got to be on one side or the other. That's just a net loser to try to play both sides of the Israel Hamas. I mean, good luck with that. So I think where she's terrible is what your data is confirming, is what we've been talking about for years, is the key voter groups in these key swing states, which are working class voters that are outside of most polls, that because they're in small towns, rural areas, etc.
69-22, and by the way, that's with the generic
You're
someone
talking Harry
else.
Truman 1948 numbers.
69-22.
Remember, that's why they got the polling data wrong in 48, was because it was such a class-divided election in 48 that Truman ran up ridiculous numbers amongst working-class rural areas.
Yeah.
And then this is a good transition, I'm really hoping she picks Shapiro, the governor of Pennsylvania, because here's a guy running around talking about freedom and workers, standing up for freedom and workers. He's been busy locking up, illegally imprisoning farm workers in the state of Pennsylvania. He is right now, as we speak, trying to shut down Amish farmers, including the biggest Amish farmer in the state, Amos Miller, prohibiting him from selling food to anybody anywhere. Shapiro is the biggest enemy of workers and freedom anywhere in the country of any governor. This is a guy who bragged about stealing the 2020 election before he even stole it. Predicted he was going to steal it.
Don't worry,
so
Allegheny's going to find.
Put Shapiro on the ticket, and all of a sudden these issues, these scandals that he's been covering up for years because the Pennsylvania press won't cover them, and most of the Pennsylvania political class is a bunch of wusses. This will make it, it's a perfect issue for somebody like JD Vance in a vice presidential debate and puts Trump even more on those side of the food freedom, put him on the side because he's already embraced financial freedom. Look at how successful that was down at the Bitcoin convention in Nashville. It's so successful that Kamala Harris was scared to go down there. And she went from saying she was going to go to abandoning, not even having the guts to go down and show up at the Bitcoin convention. Now he's got all these tech guys endorsing him. And a lot of it's related to Bitcoin and financial freedom. If he embraced food freedom in the same way and medical freedom in the same way, which a guy like Shapiro affords him the opportunity to do by contrast, especially on food freedom, then it's going to be a walk. He's going to win these states way outside the margin of fraud. We're talking that they're going to declare the winner by 9:00 at night kind of margins is what Trump is heading to if he continues to campaign in the right, smart way.
Robert, if she picks Shapiro, then that means that you and I are on, would be. Let me put it this way. If she picks Josh Shapiro, it means Robert and I have both represented and defended the victims of both the nominee for president and the nominee for vice president, because everyone's like, oh, this gets the lawfare off the table. Hello, did you and I not try to keep David Daleiden out of jail because she picked up the phone for Planned Parenthood and had to obey her masters? I mean, that's why he caught them selling aborted baby body parts, and they took away his rights as a journalist. It's funny, like, the freedom of press works for everybody except for the enemy, I guess, opponents of the left. And then you have Amos, who obviously was the focus of the target of a completely unfair, unpopular investigation, which you could even call it. You could go so far as to wade into the what's the word I'm looking for, Robert? I mean, it's not racist, but it's certainly
it's religious bigotry.
Bigotry.
The governor of Pennsylvania has tried to put prominent pro-lifers in jail. He's tried to put prominent food advocates in jail, farmers in jail. He's actually successfully illegally locked up farm workers because if they didn't have the approval of the state to do work that wasn't supposed to require the approval of the state, abusing the Commonwealth Court and misusing contempt power in the Wentworth and her cases. I mean, this guy's been horrendous. He's been harassing the Amish community now for 2 years consecutively. He's neck deep in election fraud. It's not a coincidence. It was his state where they tried to assassinate President Trump and are now busy trying to cover it up. I mean, this guy would be a disaster for Democrats, but great for Trump and great for those of us who care about these issues getting more attention because they haven't got enough attention. Just like Kamala Harris's corruption. We've talked about it. I mean, Peter Schweitzer is starting to talk about it now. She's notoriously corrupt. She's neck deep in all kinds of
turned a blind eye because the diocese gave her money. She turned a blind eye to children being molested by priests, dude. There's a whole bunch of shit that nobody ever talks about when it comes to Kamala Harris. By the way, Peter Schweitzer, I got to give him credit for that because he does in a book. It's on my bookshelf somewhere, but he wrote a book a couple of years ago, Progressive Corruption or something like something, outlining that. And the chapter on Kamala is one of the worst. I mean, there's there's like normal political corruption, and then there's moral, disgusting corruption. I mean, there were little boys being molested by priests, and she didn't do anything because they gave her money to shut her up, brother. I mean, that is as evil
at the peak of those issues. I mean, and then you have someone who kept people that she knew were innocent in prison for the purposes of prison labor. She's someone who locked up kids and parents on all kinds of questionable truancy charges and other charges and abused the pot charges routinely and regularly. While she was Attorney General of the state, she covered up the Lennar Corporation, stealing $1 billion from the California Pension Fund. Yep. Her Attorney General's office intervened to prevent a whistleblower's claim from going forward.
I forgot all about that.
Extraordinary corruption. That is she just swims in it. And this is someone that is one of the worst human beings on the planet. You can just ask anybody who's ever had the burden of having to work for her. She has the highest rate of people quitting her employment of anybody because she's a known bully.
90% of her staff in the first year as vice president quit and were turned over. There are awful, awful stories about her mocking people's looks, their sex life. She's abusive. I mean, there's no other way to put it. And by the way, I mean, this is like Politico reported stuff. This is not coming from the People's Pundit or Robert Barnes. This is stuff that everyone in DC knows is true. It's
known throughout DC, known throughout Sacramento, known throughout San Francisco. Yeah. She was despised. Then you ask yourself why there's no prominent allies other than Willie Brown. I mean, why doesn't she have people that have been with her for 20 years when you've had a political career for 20 years? Donald Trump does. JD Vance
Hillary Clinton does. Hillary Clinton did. Yeah, Come on.
William Jefferson Clinton. I mean, Barack Hussein Obama did. Michelle Obama, who's not exactly the nicest person to work for, still does. She is uniquely hated.
She hates Kamala
because it reveals a pathological insecurity that makes her a very dangerous person to be near the nuclear power.
Dude,
and this doesn't even get to the latest scandal, which is her conspiring to stage a coup so that she could steal the nomination of her party by illicitly threatening to remove the president on grounds she didn't believe were actually credible, because if she did, she would have had to go forward with it no matter what. So, I mean, this is someone under scrutiny. I mean, remember all those states? Because in 2020, she ran to the left. She ran to the woke left. She wanted to win the Twitter left crowd. So she was embracing no fracking. She was embracing we're going to have an equal equity world where everybody is equally poor and equally screwed. She embraced every wacky notion. That's why she had the record of the most liberal voting senator. It's not because she's ideological. It's because she wanted to win the liberal votes in the Democratic presidential primary and contest. And so you look, I mean, what happens when all of that gets put under any degree of scrutiny? She is getting hagiographic treatment, and she's still losing. What happens when the world starts to figure out what she's actually about?
That's what I said to people. Let's calm down here. This is going to be your like best case scenario. Maybe she'll get a convention bump. We'll see. Maybe not. But this will be like a honeymoon period where like hagiography is the right word. The media is just like heaping praise on her, fawning all over her. And by the way, we've been down this road before. She actually took the lead in the polls when the media did this last time for the Democratic nomination. And then Tulsi Gabbard stuck a fork in her. And by the way, actually, it was before Tulsi when she started to fall precipitously decline because it was herself. She did it. Her nasty ass attitude came out in front of everyone. She turned to Biden, like who the Democratic Party still liked and looked at with affection, and tried to pin him as a guy. Well, kind of Biden was a Delaware Southern segregationist.
Oh, yeah. Well, he did because there's that part of the state that is very Southern back in the day. And he was trying to appeal to that part of the state because, you know, that's Joe Biden. He'll appeal to whoever will give him power.
Yeah. And that killed her. That attack on Biden really hurt her. I remember polling the state of Florida and I had to go to the VA, Robert. And the care worker knew what I did for a living and was like, she's a liberal Democrat, and was going on and on for my 45-minute appointment about how nasty Kamala Harris is and how she can't stand her. How dare she do that to Joe Biden, blah, 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 right? Like, and that was it. And we were actually polling at that time. And I'm sitting there sharing polling data from the Florida Democratic primary with her, you know, and it was just a completely inappropriate thing for her to ask me because it was supposed to be about me, but I rolled with it because I love this stuff. So I was just like, forget it. Let me turn my appointment into this.
Well, I think Biden, I don't think Biden's going to do her any favors. I think Biden wants her to be the nominee, and he wants her to do terrible so he can say, see, you guys should not have pushed me out. You guys pushed me out for somebody else, and she did a lot worse, and now you should all feel bad about it. I don't think he said that in his speech. He's going to do nothing to boost her campaign. He's not going to be like LBJ in '68, just trying to do peace deals to push Humphrey over the edge.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't think so, man. I mean, if you were him, you wouldn't. He was doing better with these people we're looking at right now. I just wanted to go back and say, let me see what it looks like when we take out the generic someone else. For people who don't see, she lost all of this demographic. All of that someone else came from Kamala. And when you look at her, you know, what about when you lean them, right? She actually does worse among the leaners than she does among her first choicers. Trump beats her by an even bigger margin. And for people who can't read it or aren't listening, Trump is beating her with the working class 69 to 68.5, 22.8 with 8.7 undecided. And then when you lean them, she gets 15%, he gets 85%. So, I mean, that is, Robert,
she's going to set a record. She's going to do the worst amongst working class voters ever in the history of the Democratic Party.
Hillary Clinton. She's going to do worse than Hillary Clinton. Even we had Hillary Clinton at 32%. We were close, but we had her at 32. She wound up doing worse, but we had her at 32%. At least Biden was threatening 30%. You know, like I'm talking about before he was getting killed. At least he was threatening 30%. And these are the voters that are really hard to survey, folks. Those are the ones that are the problem. So we'll see what happens when it turns out. But I just wanted to show people where we're at right now with this. I mean, this is, and again, it's an educated, fairly moderate, I don't know if I should say liberal, but fairly moderate sample overall. It's about 25% liberal, which I think actually in a presidential election this year is a little bit high, but conservatives are going to be in the neighborhood of like 36 to 38%, you know, something like, maybe, because I think they're more hyped. You tried to kill their president, so they're going to come out to vote. I mean, that's just how it's going to go.
Well, and the other reinforcement of all this has been their peculiar reaction to JD Vance. It's like, I recognize this reaction.
I got a clip
about
the
reaction Yaleys have to working class people showing up on their campus. So, I mean, in fact, JD Vance portrays it both in his book and in the movie, Hillbilly Eulogy, which, by the way, is the biggest impact of Vance's nomination, is all the people buying the book and watching the movie, which will be very, very favorable.
Number one on Netflix. Just yesterday, it was at number 3 over the weekend. And when I looked last night, I clicked on Netflix instead of Prime because I wanted to watch the latest House of Dragons. And I clicked on Netflix instead. I'm like, oh shit, wrong one. So Hillbilly Elegy was up there at the top. And it's people making up their own mind. Now, his numbers don't look great to me right now. Obviously, the smear is having some impact, but I don't think that's going to be long-term damage. And I think that ultimately, this is why I think Vance is a good pick, because Vance is now like, there's not going to be a MAGA poser after Trump's next term. And they would have creamed a MAGA poser. If he would have picked Rubio, he would have been the heir apparent. Fox News would have went cheerleading for him. And he would have been nominated. He would have, because he would have spent 4 years pretending to be MAGA, and he would have cheerleaded. And then Republicans would have done the dumbest thing in the world, like nominate him, and he would have gotten killed because the Democrats would have ran against a MAGA pretender. Well, now it is not a MAGA pretender. Hey, buddy, what are you doing? You got to go back up to your mother. Go ahead, go ahead. Hi, Daddy. You want to see something cute, actually? Watch this. Are you ready? Yeah. Come here real quick. It's a mini People's Pund, and he's rocking a vest.
That's right.
Go to your mother. I'm on the show. Daddy's working. I had to show that. He loves these little vests. But go ahead. What do you think about that, though, as Vance? Overall.
For the normie voter, it will be Hillbilly Eulogy, which will be the introduction of Vance. And what's useful about that is Vance is very middle America, but also the story he tells is a story universal to working class people across the country of whatever race or ethnicity or background, in the sense of dealing with drug addiction in the family, dealing with lost jobs, dealing with displaced parents, dealing with all of those, relying upon grandparents for assistance. The kid who doesn't really want to go to school, but that may be the only tool ticket out. And then he reinforces the Trump brand, especially in the industrial Midwest, which will be essential to Trump. In other words, where he is strong is exactly where Kamala Harris is weak, with working class white voters. That he's got to bring home those working class voters because he is one of them. He talks like one of them. He communicates like one of them. And he relates like one of them. And the main story they're going to see through that is going to be Hillbilly Eulogy between now and Election Day. And then otherwise in a campaign, he's very sharp, very smart, very skilled, will be very good in a vice presidential debate. And what it told me was when their hit pieces on Vance were very much about, oh, he's weird. It's like, how do you find working class middle America weird? Weird is your Olympics presentation. That's weird. Weird is having men dress up as women and you giving them military positions.
Were hanging out, Robert.
Yeah, exactly. If they think that's normal and cool,
we're hanging out of his underwear, dude.
Yeah, in the Olympics, they think that's normal and cool and chic and modern, and they think Hillbilly Eulogy is weird. I mean, it showed like them playing over and over again the child as Catwoman and showing a picture of Kamala Harris. I was like, if I was in Harris's camp, I would not want that. You're constantly up in front of the local news. The childish Catwoman, Kamala Harris, because that is Kamala Harris. That we all know of these bossy, loony kind of the people who led the pandemic efforts, who were screaming at you to put your mask on when you walked into the grocery store. I mean, everybody knows these people, and childish cat lady is like a quick little, it's a caricature, but it's a quick image of that kind of person. And they're like, yeah, Kamala Harris does seem kind of that way, kind of weird. She's the one who seems weird. It's really confession through projection. I mean, everything about her is weird. Her laugh is weird. Her talk is weird. Her deep thoughts version. I mean, that was great fun by Trump. So I think the most important thing is what you point out. He is a conduit for populist ideas and programs within the Trump administration, will be an advocate rather than an adversary, will be someone enabling the best of Trumpism rather than sabotaging it the way Pence did for 4 years, and will be the great potential successor that's legitimate and authentic, as opposed to the posers who were trying to snooker and sneak their way in. So that's the best thing about Vance. And I agree with you. As a whole, vice presidents make very marginal difference. I think the only time a vice president helps is when it reinforces a brand that you need with a key voter group. Like, I thought the best VP choice ever was Bill Clinton choosing Al Gore in 1992, because it reinforced, now, if you really knew Gore, you knew it wasn't true, but at the time, it reinforced Southern independent, moderate Democrats. We're not Yankee Democrats. We're not Michael Do Kick My Ass. We're not Mondale. We're not
Tennessee.
So
Yeah, exactly. Tennessee and Arkansas, and Al Gore could pretend to be. I mean, his dad was a legit good old boy. His dad went around playing the fiddle at campaigns.
he had the record for the longest filibuster in the U.S. Senate. It was against the Civil Rights Act. He had that until Rand Paul broke it, I think, after Snowden, right?
Really?
Yeah,
credit them.
yeah.
Yeah.
I think I'm pretty sure that's it. Unless somebody has done it since, somebody's done something since. I'm fairly certain Rand Paul broke Al Gore Sr.'s record because Al Gore Sr. was trying to block black civil rights. I mean, that's really what it comes down to. I want to play this clip on JD Vance because, and just
he'll get better on the campaign trail. You already see that happening.
I already see it, and I got a clip that I think really works it out. It just is going to take, I think, some time for it to sink in. I do. But, people are like, oh, he's the most unpopular VP ever. It's funny. Before this smear happened, I saw a poll that showed that actually independents had a majority positive opinion of JD Vance. It was only after these attacks came in. And by the way, this poll was
temporary and transitory. It's not what's going to ultimately matter for election day.
Here's the check out this clip. This is him in Minnesota, which he just did. And, full disclosure, I was just well, I'll leave that till after. But he's a good guy. He's a legit. What's the word? Not just honest. That's not the word. Authentic. He's like truly authentic.
It's a real deal. One of the very few real deals in Washington.
Very few, man. And let me play this because I couldn't have told him what to say in response to this any better. I could not have coached him any better. This is just JD being JD.
The other day, Kamala Harris questioned my loyalty to this country. That's the word she used, loyalty. And it's an interesting word, simplify, loyalty, because there is no greater sign of disloyalty to this country than what Kamala Harris has done at our southern border. And I'd like to ask the Vice President, what has she done to question my loyalty to this country? I served in the United States Marine Corps. I went to Iraq for this country. I built a business for this country. And my running mate took a bullet for this country. So my question to Kamala Harris is, what the hell have you done to question our loyalty to the United States of America?
So, I mean, I could keep going. Going.
That's what the other thing is. You've seen him highlight border control. That was a great one to grab onto.
It's their biggest vulnerability.
Yeah, indeed. Kamala Harris isn't an American. I mean, she's less American than Barack Obama was. I mean, those lingering issues. It was Hillary who did a great job of exploiting that about Barack Obama. People always forget that. They blame the Republicans. McCain was too much of a wuss to talk about it. It was Hillary who kept showing the photos of him in African garb, and she was just hammering like crazy. But Kamala's even less. I mean, Jamaican father. I mean, another slave owner. I mean, only the Democratic Party could manage to nominate and get the first black president, have no slaves in his history, but have slave ownership in his history. Then the first black vice president, no slaves in their history, but slave owners. I mean, he was one of the biggest slave owners in Jamaica, Jamaican ancestry. And then an Indian mother, raised really in Canada, not really raised in America. Everything about her you don't get the sense of this is an American. She seems indistinguishable from a Canadian leader. She seems indistinguishable from an EU politician. I mean, even more so than Obama did. Obama gave off little vibes like that, but not like Kamala. Kamala just screams there's nothing about her that's American. So that's why it was brilliant of JD to grab that issue, because it also has those other comparisons. Who's more American, JD Vance or Kamala Harris? Everybody knows the answer to that question.
Yeah, I think that I'm looking at his numbers, and it's like the most. There are older people who are getting more liberal, and it's like his real opportunity with the numbers I'm looking at here is with younger people who probably know more about his story than some of the older people who watch like Fox still and watch CNN, and that's the crap that they're hearing right now. And by the way, this sample's too Democratic, but anyway, we don't wait for party, but when we deal with the education issue and geography, it's always the two big ones for me, Robert. It's always the stuff that immediately jumps out at me. But it seems like to me, like I'm looking at the numbers and it's kind of reinforcing my own personal like experience. I remember when, speaking of Netflix, my daughter saw Hillbilly Elegy on Netflix, and then I was like, actually, it's a book. That's based off a book, which she saw. It says in the beginning of the movie, based off a book, and she's like, Dad, I want that book. And I'm like, yeah, it's JD Vance. Actually, he's going to be a senator someday, honey. I was like, he follows your dad on Twitter, and she's like, oh no, all right, Dad, whatever. Like she didn't believe it, right? And I'm like, no, I'm not kidding. He does, and and I was like, and I'll try to get a book from him for you. She just thinks the world of his story and loves him. It's like younger people seem to have this because life sucks, man. Life sucks.
Well,
for them.
and a lot
My
of
daughter
it dealt
doesn't
with
have
the
that,
drug issues front
but her
and
friends
center.
do. Yeah,
You
yeah,
know, the
yeah.
dealt with a lot of the family issues, dealt with the struggle between wanting to be, needing a ticket by some means to get out, but not knowing necessarily the best way to get it and finding it kind of distracting or boring or obstructive at times. There's large parts of his story that are very relatable. There's a lot of working class kids who volunteered to go to Iraq and
Sure.
volunteered to enter America's military services
Yeah,
on what turned out to be a lie by
total lie.
the Bush administration. So there's a people that relate to it at every level in a way that boomers aren't going to relate to it.
And
So,
millennials,
yeah, and
like
that's
my
what Trump.
generation.
I think what Trump needed was someone that amplifies the populist message to working class voters in the industrial Midwest and younger working class voters, and that's what JD Vance does very, very well. If I was Kamala Harris, that's who I'd be looking for vice president. The problem is there isn't a Democrat.
I was
that
just going to
appeals to
say,
those
who
voters.
though? Who?
There
Because
isn't one.
there's
I mean,
no Democratic equivalent of JD Vance. He tried to be. Tim Ryan tried to be. That's probably the
Yes.
strongest candidate you're going to put up in a state like Ohio as a Democrat now. Didn't work out.
Because he comes across as fake. I mean, he used to be Youngstown, but he wasn't. Nobody was going to confuse him. Who was that great Youngstown congressman that went to prison? Trafficant. No one was going to confuse him with Trafficant. There was an old blue collar guy. I mean, there was an old
with
legit,
the knee.
old still labor Democrat.
Yeah.
But the Joe Biden was actually the last of that crowd to a degree that had at least some tangential connection to old blue collar America. And if she was smart, she'd move that direction. But instead, because they're thinking check a box, it's all okay. We probably need a white male to balance it. I mean, that's all they're thinking. That's being leaked. And
Yeah, I know. I was just going to say, actually, I knew this weeks ago because it was like not even a secret here. They called Roy Cooper. Hey, can we vet you? We need a white Southern Democrat, or we need because they
tell people how know. Roy Cooper's no Bill Clinton 92. I mean,
but they don't care. They don't care because this is could be a lot of people are looking at this as a dead end ticket. Nobody really wanted to run against Donald Trump, so she's a sacrificial lamb in the hopes they can save down ballot candidates because they were looking at an 08 level wipeout before with Biden. And I actually think I take a different view. I actually think that Biden was going to recover somewhat. I do.
Oh, yeah. I think Biden, I thought, could still steal the election. Quite literally. But, he could get close enough in Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin. Because, we know those people. If you're up there in Scranton, there was these older blue-collar Democrats that still like them. These boomers that still like them.
We talked about this before. We've interviewed tons of them. This is why, too, people are like, but Rich, if she picks Shapiro, doesn't that put Pennsylvania in play? And I'm trying to explain to people, VPs don't do much. Now, where Shapiro comes in handy for her is that whoever controls the governor's mansion in a state absolutely has a lot of impact over the electioneering of that state. So, but my question to people is, would Shapiro have not done that if he's picked? He's going to do it. If he's not picked, he's going to.
If anything, it's going to put it under a little bit of a microscope in ways he's escaped so far. The Pennsylvania media is such a wuss media that they've let him get away with a lot of incredible. Pennsylvania, it's my number one state for doing cases currently on freedom-related issues because that's how bad Shapiro is as a governor. But I do hope they put it. Apparently, now leave it up to, this was the rumor, that Barack Obama was saying he's too Jewish.
I wouldn't be surprised if Obama did say that,
That
because
would be very Obama.
it is very Obama. It
sounds like Jesse Jackson. Welcome to Town when he
got
walked into New
better
York City.
instincts. He's got better instincts, Obama, than some of these people. That's the truth. He's like, wait a minute, are you sure you want to do this? We're having a problem with the Hamas vote. You're gonna pick a Jewish guy to be the vice president? Like, that's Obama. That's textbook Obama to say something like that. I mean, so, and it's not that he's being like, he's just trying to be real, like, this is not a good idea. And honestly, we know from, and there's leaks, but I already know because I have seen the polling the Democrats did to ultimately force Biden out. Kamala was not winning. She was doing better than Biden in their polling, but she was not winning. And it showed that maybe she could win the Sun Belt, hold some of these Sun Belt states, and then pluck off Pennsylvania if she picked Shapiro. That's what all of this showed. And Obama didn't buy any of it. He didn't. He just didn't.
You can know how the numbers are going to ultimately translate. I mean, that you get a short-term boost for just being somebody different.
Yep.
But when she's put under a microscope, she's always bombed. And that's what's going to happen with her now. It's only a matter of time. And no vice president's going to change that. No other dynamic is going to change that. As we look down ballot, I think she's trouble, because I think Biden would have held some of the older blue collar boomer Democratic vote that could have pushed some of the lower ballot, down ballot candidates over the top.
Slocking, so important.
I think Pennsylvania might now be back up for grabs, where it looked like, it was going to be a walk for Casey. I mean, people still thinking that, because the people in that state that still think the kid is the old man. He's nothing like the old man. Yeah. But like, take, for example, Pennsylvania. One of the biggest trending economic issues over the last decade has been fracking in large parts of that state. She came out and said she would ban fracking. I mean, she'll run away from that now, but she's right on record saying it repeatedly, with ad after ad after ad. All of a sudden, that could put Senate and House, state Senate, statewide seats all up for grabs, because that older boomer machine-style Democrat doesn't care for her and is unhappy that Biden's not on the top of the ticket. So I think that
Florida.
Well, I mean, Florida.
Look at Florida.
And that's the other problem. Which Hispanics is he going to play well with? She never played that great with Mexican American voters in Central California. Her huge Democratic group historically. She's going to play well in Arizona. She's going to play well in Nevada. I mean, so far the polling data in Arizona, despite all the nice coverage, has gotten worse for Democrats.
It did. We got to stop and say that. Like, Decision Desk, they post weekly updates, and there have been new polls that were added since with Kamala, and it went basically a point toward Donald Trump. So did Georgia, by the way. I want to say Wisconsin did as well, despite the Fox poll. So that tells you that the other polls just were worse for her. There's going to be, and I think the Fox poll is a perfect example of one that's really screwing up with response bias. They had in their national poll two polls ago, they were one of the only ones who had Biden up. If people don't remember correctly, they did. Now they are showing a Trump +1 and a tie, with depending on the ballot scenario. They had Biden up by 2. In rural America, they had it even. They had Biden up 2 in rural America, and they had the urban vote tied. So, folks, that is a serious, serious problem with your poll if you find something like that. And yet it was released without even a caveat to say, like, I think we have a response bias. This is not normal. It's not normal for the Republican to do so well in urban areas, and it's not well for them to do so bad in urban areas, or vice versa. You know what I mean? But they didn't. They put it out there. So, I mean, despite the Fox polls, she's still down about a point worse than she was the week before. This is Florida for people who don't see it. It's 52.2 to 40.6. So this is a
state historically that has been within 2 points one way or the other for decades now.
Yep. And I mean, we had Trump up between 11 and 13 over Biden. We haven't done Florida in a bit, so we'll see how it ends up. But it's not really an improvement. And people keep acting, Robert, like a 1-2 point move is like ready. Like, oh my God, it's tightening. Like, that's a fucking sampling error. Like, it's not
the boost you got in coverage. It should have swung you. You should be Democrats need to win, particularly with Harris. I think they might need to win by 5 points nationally, because she's going to skew so upscale and disproportionate to certain electorates that she going to underachieve with so many swing electorates that she probably needs to win nationwide by 5. And they're all excited about polls that still have her losing. I mean, the national vote, which means a disaster at the statewide level.
Absolutely. And this is a great example as to why. With the leaners, Trump takes 56%. The third party candidates take a third, and she's only taking 11%. So like that is I feel like they got her, and maybe this is part of the response bias, but I feel like Harris raised the floor, but also raised Trump's ceiling. And I don't feel like
exactly
that's
the
what's
right way to
happening.
do it.
Yeah, that's
actually in swing state constituencies, because like the genius of Trump was pre-Trump, the Republican Party base were evangelical Christians. And the problem is evangelicals are underrepresented in the Electoral College. Trump said, let's make this a working class party. And the working class is overrepresented in the Electoral College, right? Like the only state that had a couple of polls show improvement was Virginia. Well, Virginia has one of the biggest government employment places in the country. And it has one of the highest post-college master's degree places in the country. And a good number of immigrants as well, Asian and so forth, where you would expect kind of her to do better. And yet she barely budged the numbers. I mean, Virginia within 3 points, and people are excited.
I know. She turned Virginia blue again.
Plus 10 state. I mean, that they used to be a gone state for Republicans because there are so many government workers and have taken over Northern Virginia. But I mean, she's not making improvements in Central Virginia, and she's going to get crushed in the mountains.
Shenandoah. Oh my God, she's going to get murdered in the Shenandoah Valley. She is.
If she can't utterly dominate Virginia, it's going to be a debacle down ballot. I mean, I think Montana's gone. I mean, I know he's held on there forever. But the other thing people forget about these Senate candidates, as even Trendy recognized, they were the luckiest group of Democrats in history. They got to run in 2006, one of the greatest Democratic cycles ever. Then 2012, where Barack Obama could carry them over the line. And then 2018, the anti-Trump cycle. They've never had to run in even a neutral political cycle.
That's why Harry Enton
Virginia's clearly swung. Yeah, Montana's going to swing. I think you look now, I think Nevada's polling, they have a hard time polling the Asian working class vote there. There's a big Filipino vote, and there's a Hawaiian vote, and there's some of those.
Brown's a great candidate, though. I don't. I'm sorry. I know. I know. I'm not saying he's going to lose.
Well, that's the question: is whether he can be competitive in that state, or I think that it's states like Nevada, where more so maybe even than Arizona, where if there's a debacle for the Democrats, it ends up leading to a sweep for Republicans.
Well, do you see the voting registration numbers in the Hispanic areas of Maricopa County? Are you looking at this? Like there was indications even when Kerry Lake lost the governor's race, which of course is another bunch of bullshit electioneering. Even when she lost, she was doing better in like the border of Pinal and eastern Maricopa, and there were these pockets of Hispanic areas in Maricopa where she even outperformed Trump, and Trump did better in these areas than he had done in 2016. And that's, it's like, okay, fine. And then the polling suggests he's doing better with Hispanics, and you're like, all right, that's another data point. But then there was the primary, and Trump was getting in the 90s in the areas that are Hispanic areas. Now, Maricopa, you can vote anywhere, Robert, but you're not going to go across the damn county to vote, right? You're still going to vote relatively close to your area, unless you're at work and it's on the other side of the county or something. But by and large, you're still going to vote in and around the area where you actually live. So Trump did better in Hispanic areas of Maricopa than he did in traditionally white conservative areas, right? Where Nikki Haley took a bigger chunk and he was getting like 85 or 82. And then in the Hispanic areas, it was like universal support for Donald Trump. Fine. That looks like that's first time primary voting to me, but what do I know, right? Anyway, now look at the numbers on a monthly basis. You can look at this. I mean, these are all, not all, but a large chunk of these voters are new Republicans. They're new Hispanic Republicans. And I'm not sure that's going to be that easy to poll. I just don't I agree with Harry Enton. it doesn't really matter what some of these polls are saying right now. There's only one Senate race, folks, where people split their ticket in the modern era, and that is Susan Collins in Maine. Yes, they can ticket split when it's an off cycle or a midterm cycle, but when it's a presidential election season in the modern era, especially since Barack Obama, I think he polarized us to the point where we got to this point. There is no state. Like Kelly Ayotte lost. She lost by a greater margin than Trump, but Trump still lost New Hampshire. It still went all Democratic. We've had some close calls, but it was what it was. Johnson, he was supposed to lose the Senate race. Trump carried Wisconsin. He carried it. Pat Toomey was supposed to lose his Senate race. Trump won it. He won it. There are no other examples other than Maine as a state voted for Joe Biden, but voted for Susan Collins. That's the only one. And it's like, despite what the polling said before those elections. So it's not like we haven't seen this before. We have. And in fact, it's becoming the norm, right? It's becoming the norm. So if Trump ends up carrying those states, historically speaking, like Roger still should win Michigan. And by the way, it looked like John James was going to do better than Trump in Michigan, and by significant margin. If you paid attention to the polls, look at the last New York Times poll. Trump was going to lose it by 7 or 10, but John James was like 2 points away. At the end of the day, they both lost by like 2 points, 2.5 points. So it was right on. There's almost no ticket splitting anymore. It just doesn't happen. There's too many people who are normies who really don't know when you're asking them as a pollster, and they may pick somebody that they recognize. But then when they go to the ballot box, they see Trump, he's the Republican, they check off for Trump, and they're going to check off the box for like Eric Hove down ballot in Wisconsin. Same thing goes, by the way, for Democrats. If they vote for Kamala Harris, chances are they're going to vote at the Senate level. Maybe not for Congress, but at the Senate level. We just haven't had any ticket splitting recently. I mean, it's been...
Exactly. I think that the phenomenon of undecided swing voters are going to vote the same way up and down the ticket. Which I think Republicans have a very high chance of taking the Senate, very high chance of taking the House.
Yeah.
What's interesting is the betting markets, because of Polymarket introducing crypto, seems to have increased the sophistication. You used to have betting markets really shifting, sort of had a liberal bias, a Democratic bias, made a lot of money betting into that bias over the years. But you've noticed that when Kamala Harris came in there, the betting markets have actually moved even more towards Trump. That in many of these states, and then they've moved more Republican in a bunch of places. And I think that sophistication represents what you're talking about. I think that Kari Lake is going to be the next senator from Arizona. And I think you might see some surprise upsets, maybe whether it's Michigan, whether it's Pennsylvania, whether it's Wisconsin, whether it's Nevada. One or two, you might see some if this Trump sweep happens amongst working class America, because you're talking about margins. Some of the polling data has them up by 9 in Nevada. I mean, no poll has ever had them up by that kind of margin. But you could see it because of the combination of the Hispanic shift amongst Hispanic millennials and Zoomers, and the working class shift, because Nevada is one of those states that is underrepresented in terms of upper middle class votes. It has very few, as one of the lowest levels of post-college voters in the country as a share of the electorate. So it's a very working class shifting electorate, but it's a working class non-religious group. That's why Obama could do well there. There's not an overabundance of evangelicals. There's a few Mormons, but not enough to counter the others. But they are very working class voters. And if those voters are trending heavily towards Trump, which I think will happen even more so with against Harris, then he might carry some people across for the House, for the Senate, for other races that people aren't even anticipating right now. So I think all the way down ballot, it's heading towards a Republican sweep.
What do you think about? And I just want to point this out before. So when you get in a state level and national polling, and there are obviously some groups and areas where we oversample and we do it intentionally. The Mid-Atlantic is certainly one of them, because you have Pennsylvania in there, and we're trying to get a better picture. The sample is to Republican in Pennsylvania, but it still suggests like an electorate that was Trump plus 6, which we know it wasn't, right? But now it's Trump plus 11. So either way, using it as just an apples to apples gauge, it looks like Pennsylvania against Harris has still shifted 5 points to Trump. So regardless of what you're looking at here, so
Well,
you're looking at like a Trump +4 win in Pennsylvania, and that's I think I'm being kind
because
of
of
like
Scranton,
modest.
Biden did unusually well in all of the northeastern part of that state, which used
Yeah,
to be part of the old, we'll remember, part of the old Republican industrial
yeah,
political machine.
old
Yeah.
Yankeedom
Yeah,
republicanism. Yeah,
dating to
yeah,
the end of the 19th century. And even
silk
when they
stock,
brought it, I got, a Welsh minor ancestor that lived up in Wilkes-Barre. So
silk stockings, baby, silk stockings.
exactly. I mean, all the way back. And what's interesting is, the suburban areas outside of Philly are trending Democratic, and I think are going to stay that direction. And Harris will do
With
just fine in
Harris,
places
we'll
like
emphasize that.
Montgomery County.
Yeah,
Where she's going to do poor is in places like South and Northeast Philly. She's going to do
Lackawanna,
real bad up in the Scranton the area. That's where you're probably going to see the biggest drop off.
Pike,
I think you'll see her.
Monroe.
I
Yeah,
think she'll hit Hillary's numbers or Biden's numbers in the affluent suburban areas. She will be below both Hillary and Biden's numbers in rural and working class Pennsylvania.
yeah.
And the places probably to watch. I mean, just the shift of the Scranton vote alone makes Pennsylvania lean Trump. And I don't think she's going to play well in places like Erie. In places like Butler County. Right outside of
Oh
Pittsburgh.
God, yeah.
She's not going to play well at all in coal country. All that environmental nonsense. Remember, Biden was always good at playing both sides of that. So that he's not really going to ban fracking. He's not really going to push a Green New Deal. He's going to be pragmatic at the end of the day. But not Kamala. I mean, she's been very clear. She's pure California and all that stuff. So if you're into fracking anywhere in 2/3 of the state of Pennsylvania, you can't afford to see her do well. Your specific job is at risk. And if you're in the old, coal mining country that's already been swinging heavily towards Trump, it'll be even more so with a Green New Deal nut at the top of the ticket. I mean, she's the most environmentally extreme candidate ever to run for the Democratic. I mean, more so than Gore. I mean, Gore single-handedly killed West Virginia for the Democratic Party.
Gore didn't run like that, like he just got kind of caught, because of his movie, his aspirations, and he kind of got caught, and the media wasn't as bad as they are now. Just so the exit polls in 2020 in Pennsylvania still showed that Trump won the burbs overall in Pennsylvania. He won them by like 3 points. Our polling is more than that right now. Of course, it is a smaller subsample, so you got to get by that. But it doesn't matter either way because we're asking people who did you vote for in 2020. What it indicates is a 9-point shift to Trump among suburban voters in Pennsylvania statewide against Harris. Harris,
and you can imagine that places like Burke, she'll do better in Montgomery. Probably better in parts of Chester and Delaware, not the rural parts of those counties, but she'll do worse in Berks. She'll do worse around Pittsburgh. She'll do worse around Erie. She'll do a lot worse around Scranton. Scranton, Wilkes-Barre is where she will have a double-digit drop-off, and that's where I think she'll hit a panic button if they have internal. I'm sure they have internal polling on Pennsylvania. That's probably what will cause her to pick Shapiro.
Oh, they do. She's down. She's just in her polling. She was just down by 2. I think it was like 1.6, and they had Biden down by like 6.
That'll be great for those that have wanted Shapiro put under a real microscope, because once that happens, he not only won't help at all in Pennsylvania. Ask Romney how picking a vice president from a state does for you. How did Paul Ryan help in Wisconsin? He couldn't even win his own congressional.
I was just saying his own district, Robert. He didn't even deliver the first congressional district to him. This is such a myth that the vice president gives you an advantage in regional or statewide areas. It doesn't. It's not supported at all by the empirical data. The strongest case is LBJ, but I hate to break it to all of you. LBJ was a crook and LBJ was a thief. All right. And it didn't matter anyway, because Papa Kennedy was the real instrumental one in stealing votes to win that election. JFK was, and I like JFK. I'm just saying, he was not a legitimate.
LBJ, he was going to win Texas anyway.
He was going to win it anyway. It was going to be.
You can see that because they in '64 are planning on dropping LBJ. Probably why he accelerated certain plans and putting somebody else on. They weren't worried about dropping votes related to it. I think the other factor, Larry Schweiker's been talking about Arizona, is that this huge Hispanic shift that we saw first begin, the tremors of it in 2020, when places like when counties named after famous Mexican revolutionaries along the Texas are voting for Trump. It's a sign something's happening.
Yeah.
And even the New York Times Deep Dive admitted it was everywhere. You could find it in immigrant communities in New York City. I mean, you did just the shift towards Trump amongst working class Hispanics and to some degree Asian voters. I think it was a response to a lot of the pandemic politics that a lot of those voters recognized they didn't want any part of that tyranny, but also the economy and immigration. They're the ones most negatively impacted by immigration. The identity politics hypothesis of the Democratic Party was always flawed. The idea that Mexican-American voters were going to vote for you because you want to bring in more illegal immigrants because you stereotype all of them as illegal immigrants, it was never going to work when those are the voters whose communities are the most harmed by illegal immigration. They're harmed in the taxes on the schools and the taxes on infrastructure, on the crime rates, and on the jobs. They're the ones coming in taking away their jobs. Not only that, if you've ever talked to anybody from any part of Central or South America, they're not big fans of anybody from any other country in the region. I mean, I've heard some of the most stuff that would be called, biased by anywhere else. But I mean, mistake a Guatemalan for being from Honduras, and you'll get a long lecture on the difference between the two. But the idea that these identity politics was going to work with these voter groups showed how utterly out of touch they are. I mean, they think Kamala Harris being an identity politician, okay, now all the voters will come. I mean, she's worse on the border than Biden. I mean, not only is she borders czar, but she said all kinds of crazy stuff about open borders. And then you got Warren running around saying how she's going to be so great for open borders.
Yeah, Warren that was a stupid interview to have. I don't know why. I would tell Elizabeth Warren to get off TV. I mean, what are you doing?
I
can't believe she said that.
She just in their mind, they think that's how to get back Hispanic votes.
We got to get rid of ICE. Remember that?
That's what they. And I think they think, hey, remember, we're for you people because you people are all illegals. Don't you remember? I mean, this is how their brain operates. I mean, they have no understanding that's going to amplify her problems. And you look at the massive shift amongst Mexican-American, Puerto Rican. I mean, the South American vote down in Miami is overwhelmingly shifted. They've lost
Trump's carrying Miami-Dade this time, buddy, pretty easily.
That's good. It's going to be wild. I mean, it's extraordinary. Texas is not going to be that close because the Mexican-American vote is trending so heavily.
Look at Texas. I just looked at it. All right. So from the 2020 to 24 vote, Texas is a 5.5-point shift to Trump. That's a big shift for
you're talking about a potential double digit win.
That's like a 12-point win in Texas. Yeah. Which, by the way, George W. Bush was the governor of Texas. Even though he won the gubernatorial election overwhelmingly, he still, I don't want to say it was close. It wasn't really close, but that's the margin he roughly won by, and it was his own damn state. And Texas, we've seen like 6-point wins, 7-point wins, in the presidential level. This is looking like it would be on par with Florida. And for a while there, I was wondering, is Florida going to vote to the right of Texas this time? It may, because everyone, I know the DeSantis lovers out there, they don't like it when we say it, but it's true. Sorry. Gubernatorial elections are not presidential elections. I mean, Ron DeSantis would not have performed that well if he was the nominee in his own state. But that being said, Florida has still been moving along with North Carolina to the right. In 22, when everywhere else disappointed, Florida was a red wave. North Carolina was a red wave, right? So we've polled Florida a couple of times. We had Trump up between 8 and 13 points, but ballpark. And this is not looking like that problem is not fixed. And Democrats think it is. And they're spending money in Florida, brother.
You believe that's my other thing.
I know.
If you're getting crushed in Florida and Texas, what's the chances you're going to win in Arizona and Nevada? Because it's the same kind of voter constituencies that are crushing you in those states. Yeah. I mean, and that's why she was always a disaster as a candidate. She doesn't help you with the working class, younger, millennial, Zoomer, Hispanic, black male voter that's abandoning the Democratic Party, and hurts you amongst the voter group that Biden was holding on to, the boomer, older, working class, industrial North voter. And that's where you have a lot of key House races. That's where you have a lot of key Senate races. So she's not going to help them down ballot. It's going to be deceptive and misrepresentative by their national surveys and by their sort of pushing for hagiographic coverage that will suppress what's actually going to happen. What's there in the when you look at the undecided vote and you ask them where they're going to lean down deep, that's a vote that tells you where the election's going to go. It's going to mass. And you look at what's happening. The other thing with Arizona is I always thought Arizona could, if you could win working class Hispanic voters in particular, make major inroads there, that the only reason why the populists were having trouble in Arizona was the old McCain constituency.
Yeah.
But that's dying out. I mean,
Literally.
that's what, 16 years. I mean, since he ran for president.
Yep.
I just assume that how much of that is still left in Arizona?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, that's a good question to ask because we actually could figure that out. And we have a lot of data spanning for years about first, second, third generation voters in both we do this in Texas, Arizona, and Nevada quite a bit, and sometimes in Florida, but we do it in those 3 states quite a bit and have for years because there was always this notion that voters were leaving California, turning Texas blue. That's not what was happening. White voters were getting more educated and more liberal, or more credentialed, I think is a better way to put it, and more liberal. Ted Cruz, like I told people was the case, he survived because of those voters moving. And because we've done that, we can kind of peg the McCain establishment, older generation Arizona voter. We know how much there were in 22. We know how much there were in 20. We actually have it from McSally in 18. Remember? Do you remember that? I mean, we've had it for years. So I could do when we poll Arizona, I should definitely continue to do that and then compare it, because I bet you we're talking like 5% now, 7%, maybe. I mean, it's got they die, man. It's just reality of life. I'm not trying to be a dick.
Precisely, yeah. The electorate changes, and I mean, it's what Democrats were banking on. They were banking on millennials and Zoomers being as Democratic in 2024 as they were in 2008. And there were hints that they were unhappy in 2012, and a lot of them didn't turn out. That turned out in 2008, and that number has just and they completely lost them under the last Democratic sort of California style government that was not even as bad as it would be under Kamala in terms of that constituency and that crowd. So that's where I think that my view is, if I were making odds, I'll wrap up. I got to head out here for a doctor's appointment, actually. But my odds would be for Trump, 85% plus chance of winning the presidency. For the Republicans in the Senate, 80% plus chance of winning the Senate, 80% plus chance of winning the House. That if there's any in places like Ohio that has it as a toss-up, I see that as 85% chance Marino's in the Senate. I don't see. I think people have still not picked up that the Democratic Party is dead in the industrial Midwest, and without Joe Biden at top of the ticket, I think we're going to see McGovern-level disasters in a lot of working-class precincts across the industrial Midwest.
Yeah, tell people where they can follow you. As always, I got it there on your thing, but tell people where they can follow you. We're not done. We're going to go till 4, though, folks, so stick around. But go ahead, Robert.
Yeah, absolutely. So we did the poll with Richard Baris, which we have a lot of the results up at 1776lawcenter.com. A lot of good issues potentially if Shapiro's the VP nominee for JD Vance to talk about in that vice presidential debate. Why are you trying to shut down Amish farmer Amos Miller? Why are you locking up farm workers illegally just because they work in the Amish community? Why do you hate the Amish so much? Why did you steal the 2020 election? Why are you trying to lock up pro-lifers in your state? There's a lot of good questions to be asked there, but some of those cases we detail what's going on, got the court transcripts, pleadings, etc. at 1776lawcenter.com. And also remember, because we're going to need honest polling more so than ever in the upcoming election, as we revert to biased polling and the rest, remember Richard's public polling project that has produced the most accurate polling. So people make the right decisions for candidates, right decisions for who they're going to contribute to, and understand which issues are moving the electorate and which parts of the electorate are moving and why. Because if you've been following us for the last 2 years, nothing over the last 3 months would be a surprise.
Not at all.
But it would still be a surprise for some people the next 3 months if you haven't tuned in. So remember to support the public polling project. to continue so we can get accurate information out there to everybody.
And all those links are in the description. Thank you for that, my friend. I will see you soon. We got to do more of these as the election gets closer, as we discussed. And
we'll try to do it every Monday. I got a couple of court appearances here, there, and elsewhere, but otherwise, we'll be here with What Are the Odds each Monday. We'll have some good betting picks for you. We'll have some good insight intel as well, and it should be fun.
All the best, my friend. Stay safe out there, all right?
Take care.
Robert Barnes, ladies and gentlemen, don't go anywhere. I'm going to take a real quick break, and when we come back, I'm going to go through some more of those numbers. They're updating as we're going. Agents are doing their interviews. People are opting, of course, when they get, they can take it through text online as well. So as these agents complete it, wrap it up, and as those people complete it themselves and wrap it up, they're coming in fast and furious now. Just taking an eye. I'm looking at key demographics. So, like, of course, it's all with a caveat because we have to see where it ends up when we're done. I'm shooting for like 3,000. We're gonna go over that somewhat because there are some groups that I want to make sure are well represented. Now, again, if you've been watching the show, you know the difference between oversampling and overrepresenting. There's a difference, and honestly, a lot of people use those words or use those terms interchangeably, and that's not accurate. You can oversample. There's nothing wrong with oversampling a certain group. But if a group is overrepresented when you wait or whatever it is that you do, they're different. Obviously, people have different methodologies. That's a problem. So if you want to oversample Black voters, and instead of it being 16% of your raw sample, or 13, really 12, 13 is what it should be. Instead of it being that, instead you're going to oversample them. So you're going to, maybe it'll be 20% of your overall interviews that you conducted, but you still make sure that they are weighted down, and weighting down is much better than weighting up. When you weight down, it means you're taking larger sample size of interviews, and you're just condensing it into its respectful or what it should be, its respective share of the electorate. And that's good, because I don't want to get too much in the weeds, but when you're looking at your weighting efficiency, what percentage it is, when you weight down, your weighting efficiency score can still remain rather high. You know, we do not like anything. We like high 90s. All right. And I should show you that on Market Site one day, and you'll see what I mean better. But when you weight up, for instance, I didn't get 12% of Black voters in my sample. It's only 8%, and I'm weighting it up. That's when your weighting efficiency plunges, because what you're essentially doing is trying to make assumptions, all right, using math, but you're still making assumptions with statistics, and you're filling in gaps that you don't have. You have all of these gaps because you don't know, you didn't conduct enough interviews. So you're hoping that 8% still applies to 12%. And that's not always the case. And you can get very large errors when you do that. So, all right, that's a little quick primer on it, but I'm going to take a real quick break. We're going to do some words for our sponsor. When we come back, we're going to look at it. It's still very female. Some things are jumping out at me, which is fine. I mean, if it ends up being more female, we'll just obviously, again, weight down. And the whole sample has to be weighted down then. Okay, you understand what I'm saying? Let's say the sample will end up being 3,000 and 200 of them. So overall, you collected 3,200 interviews. You don't want to weight down and make the whole sample 3,200, because then you're overstating that one group. It would be that you're weighting down, but it's 3,000. So you adjust your base. All right. And that's the correct way to do it. But man, I need more episodes of stuff that gets into the weeds. But in order to do that, I'd have to show you like on screen. Otherwise, it's just going to be a lot of gibberish. All right, let's keep the lights on. All right. So friends at the Wellness Company, was going to bring them up when Robert was here. You know, the food, health, all the everything in the 4 freedoms poll. So important. And the folks at the Wellness Company understand that. And America needs to pay attention, because we are living in perilous times. There are assassination attempts. There are coups seeking to take out not only the government itself. But look, that was a coup what happened to Joe Biden right there. Cybersecurity threats. And we're just getting heated up here. Now, Forbes just put out an article that our government is handling $176 million in Moderna to whip up an mRNA bird flu vaccine. Shocker. Everything we've been talking about all these months, they're gearing up for the next big one, folks. We can't trust the establishment with our health any longer. We have to take these matters into our own hands now. I'm protecting my family with a contagion emergency kit from the wellness company, and now you can too. This kit is no joke. It's your frontline defense against whatever they throw at us next. It comes packed with a whole bunch of life-saving drugs. We're talking ivermectin, hydroxychloroquine, the Z-Pack, Tamiflu, budesonide, along with a nebulizer, so you can rest easy, and that's what it is, peace of mind, knowing that you have emergency meds on hand, along with a guidebook for safe use, which is just filled with a ton of great information. Every family in America needs at least one of these kits. Laura and I have two, and we're about to get our third. It's like having an urgent care in the comfort of your own home. Get your contagion emergency kit now for as low as the cost of a single doctor visit. And at the end of the day, just having these life-saving medications on hand, it's peace of mind. You won't have to think about it. Be proactive, be prepared, and take control of your health. Don't wait for the next crisis. Go to twc.health. The link is in the description /TPP. It's in the description. twc.health/TPP. And grab your contagion emergency kit right now. Again, twc.health/TPP. And that promo code, that TPP trailing / promo code, that'll get you $30 off at checkout. Kits, unfortunately, for everyone else who's not in the U.S., they're not available, but kits are only available in the U.S. If you are in the U.S., every American needs one of these kits at least. All right. It is for the cost of forget about the, having to deal with a hospital bill. For less than the cost of a single hospital, forget about that, doctor visit to the primary care center, you can get that peace of mind. And that's why, among all the other reasons I just read to you, you absolutely need to do it. All right. And with everything, of course, that's going on in the world right now, it is no wonder that everybody is looking for protection and financial security, right? Stocks are unpredictable. Let's face it, inflation, it has a very real impact on the value of currencies. And that's why I want to talk to you about Freedom Gold USA. If you've ever thought about investing in gold or silver, or if you're just interested in continuing or starting to diversify your investment portfolio, Freedom Gold USA is the company you should check out. What I like about them, and for those who watch Inside the Numbers, you've met Brian and his team, all of the rest of his team, same way. They really do care about making sure you have enough information that you make a confident decision, you have all of the tools you need, and it's right for you. No pressure, no hard sell. If you're somebody who watches this show, they have incredible deals for you that you just will not hear about in this world, or anyone who's, trying to pitch quality currency out there. They'll give you, and guarantee it, competitive pricing on the best quality, some of the best quality and purity gold and silver you'll find. You're getting a good deal because there are no extra fees, free shipping, and insurance on all orders. You may even get some free gold or silver on qualifying purchases. Free, they'll give you a $500 credit towards opening a new gold or silver IRA. And if you're a member of this show and you use one of either the number I give you or the website I give you in a second, they're going to throw you into a prize pool, and somebody's going to get some free currency just because you took the deal that they have here. Also, if you call some of their other competitors, they're going to tell you it's a $50,000 commitment. It's a $20,000 commitment. Even Freedom Gold is usually a $5,000 commitment, but not for viewers and listeners of the People's Pundit. They've dropped that to just $500 to get you started because they want to make sure that you feel safe and you feel secure in it. I'm telling you, if you give Brian and his team a call, you'll know what I'm talking about. No hard sell. The number's 888-279-3592, 888-279-3592, or you can go to the website. That's just for us. freedomgoldusa.com/rich, freedomgoldusa.com/rich. All right. I want to look at some of, and by the way, thank you to Robert for pitching the public polling project. It is not funded, and we ran this poll because we absolutely had to. So share it far and wide with people that are like-minded, that just want a pollster who is beholden to nobody in corporate America, nobody in the political sphere. Just because the public funds it, you are my priority. All right. And that is always the case with us, but it is not. Let's face it. It is not the case with everybody. So in 2020, we had that was flying off the shelf. There was like, which state should we do next? Wisconsin or Pennsylvania? And people funded it so fast that we could do them both, right? I know it's a different economy now in 2024 than it was in 2020. So we're willing to obviously put a little bit more, I want to say effort, but it's not. It's cold hard cash ourselves in. But we had to start this before it was funded again because we needed a new national poll. Biden's gone. Twice they did this to us. The first time we do this national poll and we have brand new numbers, the debate happens and it's an epic catastrophe for Joe Biden. We have to go back out in the field. We get other numbers and they take a shot at Donald Trump. We go to get back in the field again and Joe Biden leaves the race. I mean, it's like one after the other. And to make sure we don't have stale data, we had to go back in the field again. So contribute what you can if you can. And of course, we would appreciate it if we build our contributor base bigger, then it is less of a burden on the current existing contributor base now. Hopefully we get to a point where there's a lot of people and it funds very, very easily for not much out of your own pocket. So share it far and wide, contribute what you can, and we would very greatly appreciate it. All right, let me pull this stuff up. There's a couple other groups. White evangelicals, I think I want to look at. All right, so bear with me. I'm going to pull them up. Whereas race, ethnicity is white. Religion. Actually, we don't even have to do religion because it's a logic question. If they say they're Protestant or various forms of Christianity, then we ask whether or not they consider themselves to be an evangelical or a born again or evangelical Christian. Let's pick those who say they are white and they are also evangelicals. Excuse me. Oh, it's quite a few of them so far, although they are very female. I wonder if there's data on that and we can see whether or not. I'm going to have to look for that. I'm curious. I'm very, very curious. I can already tell it's very ugly for Kamala Harris. It's 75-20 with about 5% being undecided. When asked to lean, Trump gets about 60% of them. So, it's going to be ballpark what it was for Joe Biden. She doesn't do any better with evangelicals. Why does that matter? Trump doesn't just do better with evangelicals as far as his margin goes. He juices turnout with evangelicals. He pumps them up to shares of the electorate they normally are not. So in a state like Ohio, for instance, or Iowa or Wisconsin, it's a big deal if the share of the evangelical vote goes from, let's say, 14% to much more than that. Let's actually compare that for a second. 2012 exit polls. Bear with me. There's the New York Times. I know that CNN might be broken. Concerned they're broken. CNN's historical data is broken. I could go to the Roper, but then I got to sign in and they're going to send me a code and everything. It's going to be crazy. Exit polls, how Obama won. Statista. Let's go to Statista. I want to say Bush. If you look at Bush, by the way, he did very well, obviously, with evangelicals. He just didn't do as well as you would think. That's by age. Nah, I'm not looking for that. But he was considered to be the evangelical president, and he did not do nearly as well as Donald Trump did, but also 20% of the vote in Wisconsin. When Trump is on the ballot, he juices that to a much, much higher number. All right, so here's Pew. I mean, I don't want to spend too much time on this because we're running out of time, but non-evangelical, and even as, by the way, the share of the evangelical vote has gone down. So in 2000, white Protestant evangelicals were 45%. That's a huge, could you imagine if they were 45% of the electorate? In 04, they had fallen to 42. In 08, 42. In 2012, in the 30s. Obviously, it continued from there. And Bush was only winning them about like 55, 45, 58, 42, depending on whether he went against Gore or Kerry. With Trump, we're talking about like 80, 20, 75, 25. And it's more than that. By the time you look at these states, you're looking at like Wisconsin, 17% of the overall vote. And then when Donald Trump is president, is running for president, you're looking at him ginning in Iowa, Ohio, anywhere between 25 to 33% of the overall share of the electorate. So that's why I still, even though it's no secret who's going to win this vote, that's why I still look at it like, no pun intended, religiously, because it is still that important. Biden had appeared to be doing a little bit better in the polling ahead of 2020 with evangelicals, but he did not. All right. Another thing I want to look at is African-American men versus African-American women. All right. Because everything that accounts for the small dip that Trump has had with black voters from our last poll to this poll appears to be African-American women. So here's men. If the election was held today, who would you vote for? 57% say Kamala Harris. 34% say they would vote for Donald Trump. This is African-American men. 8.4 are undecided. The leaners actually break for Donald Trump, only slightly, but they do. All right. And then if we look at the generic someone else, Harris and Trump, they didn't really move that much. 57.3 to 32.9. 3.6 say they would go to a third party. 6.2 say they're undecided. If you lean them, the third party actually gets that lean. Harris takes 36, Trump takes 14. If you start to add Kennedy to the ballot, you actually see Donald Trump tick up here with African-American men. Harris falls. They don't really all go to Kennedy. Some of them go to someone else. Some of them go to Kennedy, and 4% are undecided. When you lean, Harris takes 30. The generic third party gets it there. Those are throwaway votes. Those are people telling you, I don't really like any of them, to be honest, and I'm not sure. I don't want to say I'm not sure, so I'm just going to toss it away. Here's where Trump starts to fall a little bit. Full ballot with African-American men, yet he's still at 29.8%. Now watch this. This is what appears to be the improvement that Kamala Harris has had. All right. Whoop, whoop, whoop. Don't want to give you things. Don't want to give you things here. Whoop, whoop. Don't want to give away stuff. You're going to have to wait. You're going to have to wait. All right. Here we go. That's a leaner situation. Okay. So here is the straight up now. Okay. No generic someone else and no third party. If the election was held today, who would you vote for? This is different than it was versus Biden. So now African-American women are 75.9% for Kamala Harris, only 11.9% for Donald Trump. Now, that's still really good. This is like reality to me. We were getting numbers, and if you guys have been following me, you know, I, of course, believed and still believe that Donald Trump is going to do exceedingly well with minority voters for a Republican candidate for president. I just started to get skeptical over the fact that some of them were groups within these subgroups within subgroups that I wasn't really believing. I thought they were lying to us. And I thought it was maybe with some of those people a Biden-related problem. Nevertheless, I still thought Trump was at least going to get 16% of the black vote. That was going to happen. These are numbers that I find to be more believable. Trump is going to gain with black women. Unless we continue to poll and he collapses with black women, it's hard to convince black women who are already saying they were going to vote for Donald Trump to vote for somebody else. Kamala probably pulls some of them away. I just don't believe she's going to be able to pull them all away because we've played interviews with people before live. You've heard it with your own ears. You've seen them with your own eyes. If you are a watcher of the show, you know the interviews and you know the video clips I'm talking about that we've clipped and we've put up, showing you voters telling us why they're voting for Trump, who they voted for last time. Remember the married couple? She voted for Hillary Clinton. She voted for Joe Biden. This time she's voting for Donald Trump. If we were to contact her and her husband and follow up and ask them, did you change your mind? I'm willing to bet that she is one of those voters who will tell you that no, Kamala Harris does not change her mind. It's certainly, the data certainly suggests that the interview, the panel, the group that MSNBC interviewed is going to be a problem for Kamala Harris. They're not changing their minds. They're voting for Trump and they're sticking with him. All right. Now, there's a gender gap, is my point. A pretty significant one. But this is still good for a Republican presidential candidate among Black women. This is still very, very good. All right. Now, if you had to decide today, she beats Trump 61-39 among the leaners, which means Trump is still going to tick up a little bit higher, but she has a thorough lead on him. Now, if you throw a generic someone else, she stays roughly where she is. Trump goes to 11 and someone else gets 3.7 with 9 remaining undecided. With the lean, Trump only takes it's literally one interview. That one voter was interviewed to lean to Trump among Black women after that. Harris gets 38%, and that third party throwaway, which is what I'm telling you, they don't really like either one of them, and they're really not sure, but we don't give them the chance to say undecided, so they're picking that third party option. This is why we ask all of these ballot scenarios, because we want to know, for instance, if they didn't have a choice, who would they pick? And what the difference is between these leaners in this scenario and the leaners in this scenario is that basically a chunk of these voters are actually Trump leans. And then the rest go to Harris. All right. But it tells you that they're not really keen on Harris. They just lean to Harris in the prior scenario. But here, when given an out, they did not. It tells you they don't really like her. They're not thrilled with her. In fact, if you gave them Cornel West or another legitimate third-party option, some of them are going to go for him, or some of them are going to go for that legitimate option. Or some of them may next month give us something that's totally different. Now, when you throw in Robert Kennedy, Trump falls among African-American women to 10%. Now, again, that's still better than he's ever done, but let's see with males. What happens here? Oops, that's the next ballot scenario. Sorry. He's still pulling, for those of you who missed it, even with the generic someone else, he's still taking 33% of African-American males. He takes 13% of the leaners. Harris gets a third. Someone else's don't. That's why, by the way, again, a lot of this is a Trump vote. All right, we'll see if Trump can hold on to it. And then, again, if the election was held today, what about if you had Kennedy and a generic third party? 35% for Donald Trump. Barely budging here. Okay. His initial support is barely budging, and Harris is at 55%. This is very, very bad for a Democratic candidate. It is better than Joe Biden, but it is not much better than Joe Biden. Women, some of the women are moving back Democratic, but in truth, it's not enough of them. That's the truth. It's not enough. All right, by the way, this is why you can see how ridiculous that one poll by the Glenn Gariff group was. It doesn't matter if we're polling nationally or if I go poll Michigan right now. Robert Kennedy is not going to beat out Donald Trump with Black voters. Okay? It's not going to happen. I hate to break it to everybody. That's something wrong with that poll, and they should have known that. All right, now when we add everybody to the mix, Harris falls to 54, Trump falls to 30, but still remains at 30. Kennedy's getting 7. Cornel West takes 2%. 5% are still undecided. Chase Oliver gets 2%. Jill Stein gets 0.4. If you had to choose, obviously Trump is the second choice. They're actually very close when you look at that because it's such a small sample. But Harris gets half. Trump gets a third. It's such a small sample that honestly we need to oversample even more to know whether or not there's a difference there. But again, that means that Trump is going to end up with, what was the undecided? 5. He takes about a third of that. that means Trump is going to end up around 32%. All right, of the black male vote. Oh, don't look at that. You're not allowed. Not allowed. Not allowed. All right. So the point is, because it is 402, the point is the improvement that we see with the Democratic nominee or presumptive nominee at this point from last month's poll to this month's poll is basically entirely due to black women. And they're not ecstatic with her. And it's still, and because of that, it's an improvement, but it is not an improvement that would change the outcome of the race. It will change some of the states that are blue states that they were at risk of losing. Like wipe out scenario. But it's not going to change the winner of the Electoral College. All right. And that's where we're at right now. We'll keep an eye on it. We'll see. We'll get you the final numbers. But I mean, we're already talking about a fairly large sample. I got to get rid of it before I don't want to show anybody's personal identifying information. Hold on one second. I'll give you where we are now. I'll give you an update. Over 500 interviews with black voters, by the way, just black voters alone. Oh yeah, we're going to be over. We'll be well into 3,500 interviews by like, they may even be there now, and it's just not updated. We're booking. So that means results sooner rather than later. Locals, it also means that we're going to have our own little separate video. All right. Well, because I want to give you updated stuff. And then maybe I'll do a video on here's how Rich processes the data on locals, because I've done that on Inside the Numbers before, but it takes up a lot of the show. So maybe I'll try to do something totally separate from that. All right. So that's what we're seeing. I bet you anything that if I go through Hispanic voters, we're probably going to see the same thing. Some improvement with women, no improvement with men, and it moves the needle a little bit, but not enough. And for those who are like, oh, well, what happens if he's overstated? You could go look at the 2020 to 24 vote shift just among whites, and it's very clear that Joe Biden is overstated. His support among whites is overstated. So it's like these things, as Sean Trendy has long said, and he's right. You can't get hung up on the minutia of that too much, because at the end of the day, these things tend to iron each other out, and the poll ends up being relatively right or close to right. It's all, that's not just, I'm not talking about just our polling, I'm talking about that in general. It's the trend that we're looking for here. We're looking for the trend, and I'm just not seeing a game changer. I think Molly, her statement last night, that's what we're looking at. We're looking at maybe a successful attempt by Democrats to try to save some down ballot races because they were looking at a total wipeout. An Obama 08 in reverse. And if this is her honeymoon period and that's the best they got, then it's possible they didn't even succeed in doing that. Temporarily, maybe, for all the reasons Barnes and I discussed in the first half of What Are the Odds with Barnes and Baris. Thanks for watching. All right, I'm going to kick rocks now. Don't forget to check out our sponsors. We thank them for it. Thanks to Robert, as always. We're going to be doing a lot more of these. I know some stuff he's got going on, some court appearances on Mondays, but we'll work kind of around them. And when he doesn't have them, we'll do it. And we're going to get more frequent, because always when we get closer to the election, What Are the Odds gets more frequent. All right. So with that in mind, I'm going to kick rocks. Don't forget to like the videos if you like them. Share them far and wide. Subscribe to the People's Pundit on YouTube, on Rumble, on everywhere. I don't know what happened with Rumble again. It misfired, but we apologize for that. And obviously, many of you jumped either to locals or YouTube. When that happens, Rumblers, I would much rather you jump over to locals. All right? I really would. And you could sign up there and hang out and talk and chill with a bunch of other intellectual people that you can have a real discussion with, instead of the online toxicity that is social media. All right, with that in mind, I'm kicking rocks. I'm out. And for Laura, deuces. All right, yeah, folks.